We're going to take a short break now, but don't go away because we will be right back. Welcome back to Discover Guangzhou. Now, making dolls out of flour dough is a traditional Chinese folk art practice for well over 1,000 years. And today, we take a look at an old woman who's keeping this slowly disappearing art alive. Take a look.
This is a common residential building here in Guangzhou. In one of these apartments lives Mrs. Huang, whose life is just like every other elderly woman. However, inside one of her rooms, it's a completely different scene. This is Mrs. Huang's workshop, where she makes dough sculptures every day. Dough sculpture is a traditional Chinese folk art in the northern part of China. But not so many people in the south know about this art form, let alone engage themselves in creating these vivid and lively figurines. Mrs. Huang was an accountant before she retired in 2002. She showed a great deal of interest in dough sculptures when she was still a child. It was only after her retirement that she was able to spend most of her time making these dough figurines.
前年咧我就做到呢個啦，呢個咧就比較複雜啲啦，呢個又帶埋啲珍珠、啲頸鏈啊嗰啲啊，就慢慢嚟做啦。自己咧都覺得呢個咧就比較比以前嘅咧就好好多啦，係嘛？
With the help of some reference books and suggestions from other folk artists, she's now very skillful at her creations. But of course, it's not been smooth sailing.
最大個困難就由於我哋自己咧冇有呢個美術嘅基礎，特別咧做人咧你係冇美術嘅基礎咧係比較難嘅。人啊，佢啊個比例係點啊，乜嘢都冇，就唔知道，只能夠自己睇書啊嚟學下就咁㗎。
Whenever she gets some time, Mrs. Huang will sit down by her table and focus all her attention in making these dough sculptures.
做面塑嘅人啊，同埋做藝術品嘅人啊，呢個精神啊係唔能夠分散嘅，一定要好耐心，好喺度睇做嘅，先能夠成功。所以咧，我就覺得啊，真係啊，從事藝術嘅人啊，一定要坐得定，個心思想冇有咩雜念，先能夠成功。
Year after year, the room is now filled with her creations. Mrs. Huang is a bold thinker with lots of original ideas. She's never satisfied with traditional ways of making these figurines. Rather, she's always thought outside the box, coming up with new and innovative ways to modernize this art form. And one of her recent works excites her tremendously.
呢個山水畫啊，我就非常興奮啊！點解呢？得到個係意外個驚喜啊！我裏邊啊，就係拎咗呢個泡沫啊，將個泡沫啊猜咗麵粉，好似我哋廣州咁樣個糯米雞啊，將佢裏邊咁一塊麵粉咁包住呢個泡沫咁。做咗以後呢，就發覺呢，佢第二日呢，自然咁裂開晒啦，就好似啲山裏邊嗰啲爆裂咁樣啊！哇！我就非常興奮，因為我哋做面塑啊，一般都唔要求佢爆嘅，但係呢個呢，佢居然爆開啊，俾我非常興奮啊！
Her only son is very supportive, and as a matter of fact, it was her son who actually called us, requesting for an interview with his talented mother. When it comes to suggestions, he is always willing to offer his ideas. 呢度整個梯係嘛？咁啊，第日我整咗就加埋個梯落去得㗎啦，係嘛？係嘛？嗰啲貨又唔使全部企喺度嘅。唔使企喺度啊？即係有啲企喺度，有啲唔需要全部企喺度。好啊好啊好啊！即係個用姿態多啲多啲。好啊好啊好啊好啊。The themes of Mrs. Huang's works of art keep changing. Since it's now the Lunar New Year, she has made some dough figurines reflecting traditional customs during the festive period. 喺我哋廣州啊，過年啊好隆重嘅。以前啊，燒炮仗啊，喜慶啊，特別鄉下啊嗰啲人啊喜慶啊，都有個福字啊嗰啲嘢嘅。我依家就做到好多呢啲啦。
喺個花市裏邊啊，買花啊，人山人海啊，我自己都做到好多呢啲咁嘅嘢出嚟啦，同埋買啲金桔啊。
On the day of our interview, Mrs. Huang is going to visit one of her old friends, whose grandson is very fond of dough sculpture.
好看哈，真好看。这个呢，叔婆给你做的，放那个圆笔的，知道没有啊？哈，那个笔筒哈，放的哈。对，还有这个孙悟空，知道吗？啊？喜欢吗？喜欢哈。学校有没有做啊？
有没有福啊？
福啊，我叔婆以后拿来给你。
咱们的南方呢，这个用这个面塑这个还是比较少，像他这个能够搞得那么好啊，做得那么好啊，这个太多。
On the walls of her workshop, there were some red Chinese characters, which had been specially prepared for our interview.
色彩呢，我就代表面塑。因為面塑呢係我哋中國啊最古老一個民間藝術品嚟嘅。好多人呢，因為社會依家發達啦，呢啲嘢呢好多人都幾乎失傳啦，都冇咩人去做。但呢我就唔想佢失傳，想佢喺我哋呢個廣州呢個旅遊城市啊繼續保留落去，俾啲外國人啊嚟欣賞嚟睇。
Sometimes, Mrs. Huang likes to go to universities here in Guangzhou to introduce his traditional folk art to overseas students. Her meeting with Vazou, a Chinese girl brought up in France, can be credited to a dumpling made out of dough.
我去到港外時就認識得呢個小黑，即係非洲嘅，好熱情。我送咗俾佢，佢高興得跳起身，好歡喜。我話你識唔識一個法國嘅留學生啊？佢話識，又俾到名片俾我，咁啊聯繫上。我去到嗰度送到一個面塑嘅餃子啊！呢個法國嘅留學生係一個歸僑嘅，好高興，拎住啊咁睇啊蝦餃。
有一日咧，佢打電話俾我，唯一一個朋友喺咧，即係我喺港外又係讀書嘅，讀普通話。咁咧，佢話咧介紹咧一個朋友俾我，即係阿黃太。佢話咧介紹咧好特別，佢特別咧嗰啲挑塑，即係用啲麵粉做嘅。咁我哋都未見過嘅，因為平時咧我嗰件咧我係法國長大㗎嘛，咁多數咧係睇嗰啲片咧就有見過，即係好古老嗰啲嘢咯。
有啊，你上次話叫我俾嗱。係咪？這下就仔啊！係啊。
是第一次看我。
第一次，好。那你回到你的家鄉，回到你的祖國，你都跟人家講，這是面粉做的。
我覺得還可以啊，還好漂亮。
之前有沒有了解過面粉做的？
有啊。
你沒有想過面粉可以做成公仔啊？
我以前沒想過，可是我現在看出來，覺得有興趣。
In her spare time, Mrs. Huang often goes to the market to buy materials that she needs to make a dough figurines. The Chun Clan Academy is one place that she often visits. This ancient building seems to give her plenty of inspiration for her creations.
我做呢個畫啊，面塑畫啊，就由於睇到呢啲嘢以後啊，就啟發到我啦。我就諗到拎麵粉啊，做成呢啲畫啊，就可以放喺個框嗰度，就係呢啲啊，睇到呢啲啊，人哋嗰啲係木挑噶啦，我就拎個木嚟改成呢個面塑呢度，咁就得噶啦。
At the end of the interview, I questioned Mrs. Huang whether she's ever thought of opening a shop to sell her dough figures. And she humbly answered that she doesn't think that what she has made is worth much money, and she simply wants to continue making her creations and try to keep this art form alive. It is a desire to spread knowledge of this art form to future generations. No one can tell what the future will hold, but I sincerely believe that Mrs. Huang will keep on walking on the road that she has chosen, one step at a time.
Now let's take a look at what else is happening around the city.